Hi, and welcome back to English Lessons with Stephanie. This is reading lesson 10. In this lesson, we'll do a guided reading, paragraph by paragraph. During this lesson, you can practice reading out loud by pausing the video, reading for yourself, and then unpausing the video to listen. We'll be using the GASP method of guessing, answering questions, summarizing, and predicting. The GASP method will help us to read more quickly. We'll guess at phrases or words that we don't understand. We'll try to answer questions at the end of each paragraph. And then we'll summarize the paragraph, that means tell the main idea, and predict what we think we'll read about in the next paragraph. So let's begin. You can pause the video here and practice reading out loud, or you can listen to me read it first and then pause it and try it for yourself. Have you ever wondered how children can pick up languages so easily, while adults have a much harder time learning a new language? There are several reasons for this. The first is how our brains develop. Children's brains grow quickly and absorb new information much more easily than the brains of adults. Many language experts say that human brains have evolved to understand our first languages easily. This helps us to communicate and survive from a young age. Adult brains are less flexible. So this reading passage starts by asking a question. Have you ever wondered how children can pick up languages so easily, while adults have a much harder time learning a new language? Why does this reading passage start with a question? Oftentimes, a passage will start with a question to tell us what the passage will be about. So we know by reading this question that this passage will seek to answer this question in this reading. The word wondered means to ask yourself. Have you ever asked yourself how children can pick up languages so easily? And pick up here is a phrasal verb, and see if you can guess what you think pick up means. The second paragraph answers the question by saying there are several reasons for this. So this pronoun, what does this refer to? Well, this refers to this question. We see some other interesting vocabulary here. The first is develop. See if you can guess what you think develop means. And absorb. Children's brains absorb new information easily. What do you think absorb means? And evolved. Many language experts say that human brains have evolved to understand our first languages easily. On the other hand, adult brains are less flexible. So see if you can guess what these words mean. Finally, which sentence gives the main idea of this paragraph? The first sentence is not the main idea because there is only one reason talked about in this paragraph. The second sentence is a little too general, how our brains develop. The third sentence compares children's brains to adults' brains and says how they're different. The fourth sentence gives us an idea by language experts that supports the idea in the third sentence. These fourth and fifth sentences both support this idea from the third sentence, and the last sentence only talks about adult brains in comparison to children's brains. So I would say that the third sentence is the main idea of this paragraph. Now let's predict what we think we'll read about in the next paragraph. While you're predicting, think about the main idea of this paragraph and what you think will logically follow. Here's our next paragraph. The second reason why children tend to learn languages faster is that they learn languages differently. Children learn to listen first. Before children speak and imitate sounds, they spend at least a year just listening. Later on, maybe when they enter school, they learn the sounds of the alphabet. That's pronunciation, and then to read. Finally, they learn to write. A little bit of grammar might be taught much later in school, but grammar is mostly learned naturally, by listening and having adults correct them gently along the way. Alright, so in this paragraph we talk about another reason why children tend to learn languages faster. And we say that children listen first. Before they speak, they imitate sounds. So guess what you think imitate means. Think about children and how they learn to speak. Later on, they enter school, they learn the alphabet and pronunciation, and then to read. So what do you think is the main idea of this paragraph? For this paragraph, instead of choosing a sentence that gives us the main idea, I'd like you to create a sentence to give us the main idea. Remember that a main idea should not be too small or too large, but it should give a general idea about what everything in this paragraph is about. You can see in this paragraph that we talk about all the different language skills: listening, speaking, pronunciation, reading, writing, grammar. And you can see that this talks about an order of things. It has the words first, before, later, then, and finally. So this is telling us the order in which children learn languages. Our second question here is, what information is missing from this paragraph? So to think about this, let's look at the first sentence. Children learn languages differently. And ask yourself, differently from whom? Well, we are trying to compare children with adults, but there is no mention of adults in this paragraph. In the paragraph before, we talked about adults and children, but in this paragraph, there are no adults. So what do you think we will read about in the next paragraph? Here's our next paragraph. Adults learn languages very differently, especially when they learn in school. Oftentimes, grammar is the first thing they learn. This is so they can compare how the new language is similar or different to their native language. The first skill they learn is usually reading. Next, they might learn how to write. This is because reading and writing can be done independently, from books. After that, they might learn how to read out loud and then to talk. Last, they'll learn how to listen. Listening and speaking, the two easiest skills for children, are usually the two hardest skills for adult learners. In our first sentence, it says, adults learn languages very differently, especially when they learn in school. What is the purpose of this underlined phrase, especially when they learn in school? Why is this in this sentence? How would the sentence be different without it? The sentence without this underlined phrase would have almost the same meaning. Adults learn languages very differently. By adding this underlined phrase, especially when they learn in school, the difference becomes even more important or big when adults learn languages in school. This is also a way of saying that we understand that adults learn languages differently from each other too. Some adults might learn in school, and some adults might learn outside of school. We see some vocabulary here. We have the word native language. I'm sure you can guess what native language means. And then we have the word independently. So think about what this could mean. Reading and writing can be learned independently from books. Next, let's look at the purpose of this phrase between the two dashes. These short lines here are called dashes. So the sentence says, listening and speaking, the two easiest skills for children, are usually the two hardest skills for adult learners. This is a common form of punctuation. What does it mean? What is the purpose? This information between the two dashes describe the two examples that come before it, listening and speaking. Another way to say this sentence would just be, listening and speaking are the two easiest skills for children and usually the two hardest skills for adult learners. This is a common way of using pronunciation because it's more similar to how we speak. So finally, how do children and adults learn languages differently? This paragraph and the previous paragraph tell us how children and adults learn languages differently. You should be able to explain in your own words how they learn languages differently. That leads me to my last point. Children are usually better at learning languages because they are fearless, especially about speaking and understanding. Children make tons of mistakes when they're talking, but they don't care. They often don't understand, so they ask a lot of questions. Adults have different attitudes. When adults start to learn a language, they have much larger expectations. They want to learn quickly. They get frustrated easily, and they feel ashamed when they make mistakes. So this last difference describes children as fearless. And if you look at the word fearless, you should see a suffix, less, that means without. And the root word is fear. Fear means to be afraid of something, to be scared of something. So if you're fearless, that means you are without fear. You have no fear. You're not scared of something. The difference here is that children are fearless. What does that seem to say about adults? Because we're saying that children and adults learn languages differently. If children are fearless, that means adults are fearful. They are scared of things. So adults have different attitudes. You can guess what this word attitudes means. If we're talking about our emotions here, how we feel about things, it says adults have much larger expectations. So look at this word expectations and see if you can guess what it means just by looking at it. The root here is expect. Next, we have the word frustrated. They get frustrated easily and they feel ashamed when they make mistakes. So imagine what you think these words mean. They describe emotions. So how do adults feel when they are trying to learn a new language? So now let's summarize this paragraph. Tell us a sentence about what you think the main idea is, and then predict what we'll read about in the next paragraph. I'll never forget when I visited Paris with my family. I had studied French for 5 years by then, and so, when we got lost and needed directions, it was up to me to ask someone, "Where's the museum?" This question's only 4 short words, but the man I asked couldn't understand me, and was also very rude. I was so embarrassed. It made me never want to speak again. As a result of that experience, I lost a lot of confidence as a French speaker. So let's start by asking some questions. This paragraph is very different from the other paragraphs we've read so far. Why is it different? What is a key difference in the way this paragraph is written? What word do we see here many times that hasn't been used before? I'll give you a hint. It's a very short word. And that word is I. This paragraph is very different because it's written in the first person. It talks about me. Up until this point in this reading, there is no me, there is no I, and suddenly there is an I. Why is this important? Now we're listening to something special that the writer has to say. In this paragraph, we have the phrase up to me. It was up to me to ask someone. What do you think that means? And we have 2 more words that have to do with feelings, embarrassed and confidence. What do you think embarrassed means? How do you think I felt when this man couldn't understand me speaking French? And then I said I lost a lot of confidence as a French speaker. What do you think I lost? What kind of feeling did I lose here? So now you can give us the main idea of this paragraph, thinking about the key difference, and then predict what we'll read about in the last paragraph. So this is what I tell all of my adult students. Don't compare yourself to children, just as you would never tell them to compare themselves to adults. Actually, don't compare yourself to anyone. Just do the best you can. Learning a language is hard, but anyone can learn to read, write, listen, and speak if they have the desire. All it takes is time, practice, and most of all, patience. So in this final paragraph, there is another difference, similar to the paragraph we just finished. What is a big difference in the way this paragraph is written? What word do you see here several times? So in the previous paragraph, we saw the word I a lot, and in this paragraph, we see the word you. This is important because now the writer is speaking directly to you, the reader. Why does this paragraph begin with the word so? What does so mean? So is a conjunction that connects ideas. So this is telling us that this final paragraph is connected to everything that came before it. It's a very casual way of speaking. You shouldn't actually, when you're writing, start a lot of sentences with the word so. Now in this sentence, we also have the word just. And just is a word that has a couple different meanings. What does it mean here? Don't compare yourself to children, just as you would never tell them to compare themselves to adults. Here just means similarly. So for example, if you want someone to do what you're doing, you can say, do just as I do. That means do the same as I do. Let's end by asking a question about the entire reading passage. This reading passage has 2 purposes. What do you think those purposes are? I'll give you a hint that means a little bit of help. One of the purposes is in this paragraph alone, and the other purpose is in all of these paragraphs. So the first part of this reading explains to us why children tend to learn languages more easily than adults. So that's one purpose. That's just an explanation of how that happens, why that is true. And secondly, in this last paragraph especially, I address the reader. These are usually probably adults. And I'm telling adults not to worry, not to feel stupid, just because it's hard for them to learn languages. Because it's hard for all adults to learn languages. Don't worry, you learn languages differently than children, And that is normal. Don't compare yourself to children and just do the best you can. You can do it. You can learn a language, but you're just going to learn it differently than children would. So that's today's reading. So first, summarize what you've read, the entire passage. Go back and review any parts you're still confused about, looking up words in a dictionary. And think to yourself, think back on the reading and see, how does this compare with your own experience learning English? Does it describe your experience? And how does it compare with your experience learning your first language? Does it sound right to you? So thanks for joining me today. I hope you learned a little bit about language learning, and please do continue with writing lesson 10, where we'll look at all these vocabulary words and describe what their meanings are exactly and how to use them properly when writing. So if you're enjoying these free lessons, please remember to like, comment, ask questions, and subscribe. Thanks, and see you next time.